You answer the bloody thing.
Hello? Mrs. Hacker speaking. Oh, congratulations, Prime Minister. It's Annie here.
Perhaps the episode which impressed me most was the first one in which the new minister is waiting to become a minister. And I have lived through that. I've sat by telephone, hoping for the Prime Minister phone. I've had my friends phone me to see if the Prime Minister's phoned. I've been infuriated by them in case they blocked the line and the Prime Minister said, if Hattersley is not prepared to take the call, I won't appoint him. And I've also turned up at the new ministry with my political assistant, who was no more welcomed in the department than Hacker's political assistant was welcome when he arrived.
But this is the waiting room.
Precisely, sir.
But I'm Jim Hacker's special advisor.
The minister now has a whole department to advise him, sir.
Look, he needs me.
Yeah, of course he does, sir, but until the minister sends for you, would you be so good as to wait?
It would be nice to think that political advisers, when they came into government, were welcomed as allies and friends by the civil service. In fact, of course, they hate each other.
Tony J.
The more they can do to keep political advisers out of the way, because political advisers can point out issues and dangers that jeopardise a perfectly sound policy.
Humphrey, Frank has got to have an office of his own in the department.
Certainly, Minister, if you insist.
I do insist.
Well, I do think we have some spare office space in Walthamstow, don't we, Bernard?
I remember saying that I thought that was a bit far-fetched to a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Defence.
Lord Butler.
He said that they tried to put one of their special advisers in the Adelphi or somewhere miles from the central building. Trying to get the use of the room could be quite tricky. I suspect that the scriptwriters got that from some minister. I don't think they did from me. I can remember at least two examples, one involving the Prime Minister's special advisor and one involving mine, where the problem of which room they were going to use did actually become relevant.
But not every minister agrees with Ken Clarke about the portrayal of political advisers in Yes Minister. Baroness Simons explains.
That is something it didn't get quite right. I'm afraid I belong to the school of thought that thinks that actually where this relationship works, it works extremely well. And my own view, controversial though it may be, is that actually we need more of them rather than fewer of them. Now, I should say that I am married to a political advisor, so perhaps I have a particular take on this.
I have to say that I completely disagree with Lady Simons. I'm on the side of the civil service. Although I did marry my private secretary. One of the things the series got right was the relationship between a minister and his government driver. They are the one civil servant who might stay with you through your ministerial career as you move between departments. My driver, Bert, was so invaluable to me that when I became leader of the opposition, I took him with me for another 4 years. Government drivers become good friends to their ministers and are one of the best sources of information about what is really going on in Whitehall.
It was particularly important in reshuffles. The ministerial drivers always knew the reshuffle was coming. Your own driver usually knew whether you were involved. So it was always reassuring when suddenly the summons came to go to number 10 to have your driver say, don't worry, sir, I think it's going to be all right. And no doubt some people got driven to number 10 saying, I think you may be in a little difficulty, yes, sir, Minister.
We do know that Douglas Jay, when he was sacked from President of the Board of Trade, was told by his driver the day before that he got the sack. And this was because the news had percolated down to the driver's room, talking to the driver about who he would take on after Douglas Jay.
So if the general tone was true to life, what about the characters? Tony J.
A lot of people have asked us if we were basing our Jim and Humphrey on particular characters, and the answer is no. In fact, at the basis of everything is not a particular personality one way or the other, but a basic reflection of the hopes and fears, the punishments and rewards of life at the top of government.
Yes, I mean, no, yes, I mean, well, definitely not, no, yes, I mean, no.
So what did the civil service think of Paul Eddington's portrayal of the minister, Jim Hacker? Michael Bishard explains.
I think as far as Hacker is concerned, what the programme did really well was to encapsulate in one person the various pressures that every politician faces. For example, the politician that wants to make a difference and add value, the politician who's concerned about how his constituency is regarding him, the politician who's concerned about his career and how that's developing.
And do any real politicians empathise with Jim Hacker?
I have been a comparatively lowly cabinet minister. I faced many of the problems he faced, and I've certainly faced the uncertainties and doubts, the self-doubts, that I think anybody at the bottom of the cabinet list is likely to face. I identified with his nerves, I identified with his mistakes.
Roy Hattersley. But what about Norman Tebbit?
I suspect that from time to time one could find hackers in this world. I think we mostly got rid of them as fast as we could. But I think the programme was a caricature, but a brilliant caricature. And sometimes, if you were sitting there, perhaps just a little bit uncomfortably close to the truth.
So was Nigel Hawthorne's portrayal of the Permanent Secretary, Sir Humphrey Appleby, fair?
Well, it's clear that the committee has agreed that your new policy is a really excellent plan, but in view of some of the doubts being expressed, may I propose that I recall that after careful consideration, the considered view of the committee was that while they considered that the proposal met with broad approval in principle, that some of the principles were sufficiently fundamental in principle, and some of the considerations so complex and finely balanced in practice, that in principle it was proposed that the sensible and prudent practice would be to submit the proposal for more detailed consideration, laying stress on the essential continuity of the new proposal with existing principles, and the principle of the principal arguments which the proposer proposes and propounds for their approval, in principle.
Without naming names, there certainly were the odd permanent secretaries who were as difficult to deal with as Sir Humphrey, but would behave in the same courteous and Delphic and roundabout way in trying to make sure that what they thought we were rather impetuous and ill-thought-through ideas were not pursued with too much vigour.
I can empathise with Ken Clarke about that, but does Robin Butler?
I don't think that civil servants behave like Sir Humphrey habitually. There are certain tactics, certain ways of talking to ministers that the series captured very well. Civil servants want to be polite to ministers, and so it rings true with me when Sir Humphrey says of some particularly crazy idea that Jim Hacker has, well, that would be a very courageous decision, Minister. One can recognise civil servants using that sort of language. But I certainly don't think that civil servants are as Machiavellian and as conspiratorial as Sir Humphrey comes across.
But how concerned was the civil service about the implication that permanent secretaries were all like Sir Humphrey? I can reveal that meetings took place at the highest levels. Robert Armstrong was Britain's top civil servant at the time as Secretary to the Cabinet.
It was a subject which we did try to discuss. There was nothing we could do about it very much. I think on the whole, the permanent secretaries at that time, we did feel that the portrayal, certainly of Appleby and also of Hacker, was distorted, and that was probably not good for the image of the civil service.
So has anything changed since?
There's still hanging around Whitehall some of the Mandarin language. I give a rather topical and political example. Lord Butler's report on his investigations into the background of Iraq was one of the most damning criticisms of the workings of government I have ever read. But you did have to understand Mandarin to realise this was total condemnation. The polite language was meant to reinforce the savageness of the criticisms. And because it was in such tremendously diplomatic tones, I'm afraid my old friend Robin Butler's criticisms rather lacked force.
So the question we all want answered is, has anyone actually worked with Sir Humphrey? Baroness Simons, maybe?
Yes. I trust you're not going to press me further on that point, as I am a serving minister.
And Lord Armstrong is determined it isn't him.
I have to deny indignantly that I was the model for Sir Humphrey, and I know this to be so because Anthony J. gave me a copy of the book of the first series of the programme, and he'd written in the front of it, "To Sir Arnold Robin," crossed out Sir Robert Armstrong. So I knew that I was not Sir Humphrey Appleby, but perhaps there was something in common between me and the Secretary of the Cabinet in the first series, our initials in reverse.
The programme quickly became a success, gaining audiences of up to 9 million viewers, with high appreciation figures too. But what was the reaction of the Westminster village? Tony J.
Quite early, articles started to appear which did exactly what we wanted to, which was to confirm the authenticity and accuracy, because an enormous amount of what we invested in the programme, we invested in to make it as authentic and as accurate as we possibly could. And more and more, as the first series went on, people suddenly realised they were getting the other side of politics, the side they weren't being shown, the side that happened off the screen. And because we did a lot of research in order to make it credible, the press and the media generally reinforced this.
The programme even made it into the inner working of government, as Robin Butler and Robert Armstrong explain.
Well, I discussed it a lot with Margaret Thatcher because it was well known, one of her favourite programmes.
We used to joke about it. She got the videos in for Christmas one time and had a kind of session watching them all. She did enjoy it very much.
Margaret Thatcher often used to say to me when we were having an argument, "This is like something out of Yes Minister."
And the programme's #1 fan did assist the writers.
When the series graduated from Yes Minister to Yes Prime Minister, she asked me to show Tony J and Jonathan Lynn round number 10 so that they could see the settings. And I did that and took them through to the Cabinet Secretary's room, Sir Humphrey's room. And they reproduced all these settings so exactly that you could believe you were in the room. So indeed, I remember one occasion when Nigel Hawthorne was doing Down Your Way, and I was Cabinet Secretary, and he came to interview me in the Cabinet Secretary's room.
There comes a moment in every Whitehall farce where the imposter is confronted by the real thing, so it won't surprise anybody to hear that I'm now sitting opposite the Cabinet Secretary, Sir Robin Butler.
And seeing him in that room, I had an identity crisis. I wasn't really quite sure whether he was the real thing or I was.
So 25 years on, what is the legacy of Yes Minister? My old friends Robin Butler and, firstly, Ken Clarke.
I've always said that it's far too close to life to be safely shown to the public. 20 years ago, the conduct of business did have that atmosphere. Things you proposed that the civil servants agreed with would be expedited extremely rapidly. Things you proposed that your permanent secretary didn't actually agree with would run into difficulties and take a very great deal of time, and you had to keep checking that anything had actually happened.
I always recommend that people should take out these series and look at them as one of the best political textbooks about the British system that they can read.
And for the future, Norman Tebbit has an idea.
Someone will have to do a series called Yes Commissioner, although they'll probably find their offices are bugged and broken into, things like that, by the Commission if they went so far as to do that.
It's clear that Yes Minister holds a deep affection close to the hearts of most politicians and civil servants. But whether that affection is because of its comic genius or its credibility and authenticity is a question no one can answer.
Yes, Prime Minister.
No, Sir Humphrey. Well, not this week, anyway.
William Hague returns next Saturday morning with the conclusion of Yes Minister, The View from Whitehall. The producer was Anthony Worrell.